As you'll recall, over the last week or so, when we started this, we started with 7.1. 7.1 covered the distributive property. Another name that you'll often hear about is expanding the problem, which means the same thing as the distributive property. We then moved to 7.2, which is the factoring, where you had to take out the greatest common factor. Then we moved on to 7.3, which dealt with adding expressions. That's what we did on Friday. Within that section, or within that little lesson, we talked about like terms having the same variable. They have to have the same exponent. We talked about coefficients. So today, we're going to move on to 7.4. 7.4, your central question is, how can I apply distribution to subtract algebraic expressions? And our topic is subtracting algebraic expressions, and this goes, like I said, with digits 7.4. And as the other videos, pause the video as you need to, and start it back. Pause it and start it as you need to take your notes. I will be checking these notes. There's certain things I want you to have down, and so I will be checking these. I'm probably going to call you up in the next day or so, and I'll check these. So you may want to pause it right now so you can copy this. We're going to be talking about subtracting algebraic expressions. The question is, how do I subtract algebraic expressions? Algebraic expressions, subtracting them is a little bit different than adding algebraic expressions. So just to start out with, if you will, in your notes, to subtract two algebraic expressions, you must distribute the minus sign as you remove the parentheses. I cannot stress to you how important it is to distribute the minus sign. This is what causes the majority of the problems with subtracting algebraic expressions. So I'll give you a minute to copy this, or I won't give you a minute, but you'll pause your video if you need to copy it now. And we're going to start with this expression right here. X plus 4 in parentheses minus 2 minus 7x. Now, obviously on Friday with the adding algebraic expressions, we talked about identifying your like terms, regrouping them if you need to kind of put the terms together, and then combining your terms. But with subtracting algebraic expression, the reason we know this is subtracting is because of that minus sign. What we have to do, as it says right up here, is we have to distribute that minus sign. So when we distribute it, I'm going to first of all write the first part exactly the way it is. Except I'm going to take off the parentheses. When we distribute that minus sign, it distributes with every part of that problem. With the exception, we don't distribute anything past that minus 7x. So when we distribute it, think about that as being multiplied. A negative sign and a positive 2 makes that a negative 2. A negative sign and a negative 7. Think about multiplication. 2 negatives equal to positive, so that becomes positive 7x. Another way of thinking about it is whatever set of parentheses comes directly after that minus sign, you're going to take the opposite of every sign on the inside. For instance, on the inside we have 2 minus 7x with a minus sign in front of it. If I take the opposite of everything on the inside, that 2, which is positive, becomes a negative 2. That minus 7 is a negative 7, so that becomes a positive 7 or plus 7x. So it's very simple. You just take the opposite of everything that's on the inside. You don't do it to just the first term, but you do it to every term in the inside. So now that we have everything taken care of as far as distributing that minus sign, I'm going to go right back through my steps. I'm going to, first of all, identify my like signs. So I have an x and I have a 7x. So those are my like terms. So x and 7x, if I have the same variables with the same exponents, that means that they are like signs, or they're like terms. So I've got an x, I have a 7x. Remember, the coefficient for that x is 1, so 1x plus 7x gives you an 8x. I have a positive or plus 4, which is a constant, and I have a minus 2, which is a constant. 4 minus 2 is 2, so all I'm going to do is bring that 2 down and put it right here. Now, I'm not bringing this 2 down. I'm bringing the 2 down I get when I subtract 4 minus 2. Now, one of the steps on Friday we talked about is regrouping. I told you I don't really do that. But if I was to regroup these, I would regroup it so that x plus 7x are together, and then my plus 4 and my minus 2 are together. That way I have these like terms together, and I have these terms together. So x plus 7x is 8x, 4 minus 2 is 2, so this right here is my answer. Simple enough? All right, let's go on to the next one. Let's try this one. Remember, we have a minus sign. So what are we going to do with that minus sign? We're going to distribute it. So that minus sign distributes to every term that's in the parentheses behind it. So I'm going to go ahead and write what I have here in the front part. Negative 9x plus 15. I'm going to distribute that negative sign. Remember, everything on the inside becomes the opposite of what it is. So that positive 2x now becomes a negative 2x. That minus 1 now becomes a plus 1 or a positive 1. And the step that I usually don't do because I just never got in the habit of doing it, but I think it's an important step, is if you want to, let's regroup everything so that our like terms are together. So I've got my negative 9x. I'm going to put with that my negative 2x. A lot of students think this is an easy way to group everything together or put them together so that you can see what needs to be combined. I'm going to take my plus 15 or my positive 15, and I'm going to group it with my plus or positive 1. All right, now I have my like terms together. So what I can do now is go through the process. Negative 9x minus 2x. Remember, with adding and subtracting, if the signs are the same, you add and keep the sign. If the signs are different, you subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. So these have the same signs, so same signs, I'm going to add. So 9 and 2 give you 11, and I keep the sign so it becomes negative 11x. This right here, that's just regular elementary math. 15 plus 1 is 16. So my answer to this is negative 11x plus 16. All right, let's try this one. This time, we don't have a minus sign. We do, but most people are going to look at this as a negative 2. We've already talked about the distributive property, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and distribute that negative 2. So I'm going to bring down the front part or the first part, so that gives me 4x plus 3. And I'm going to distribute. When I distribute, I multiply. So negative 2 times a positive 8. Remember, you can use this with multiplying and dividing to determine if your answer is positive or negative. That's only with multiplying and dividing. So a negative 2 times a positive 8, negative 2 times a positive 8 gives you a negative 16. A negative 2 times a positive 8x. A negative times a positive gives you a negative, so that gives us negative 16x. And if you'd like, go ahead and regroup so that your like terms are together. So that gives you 4x minus 16x plus 3 minus 16. And again, when we're combining our like terms with adding and subtracting, we have to follow the rules for positive and negative numbers. So a positive 4x and a minus 16x, those are different signs. So the rule says we're going to subtract. So subtract 16 minus 4, it gives you 12. Take the sign of the bigger number. 16 has a greater absolute value than 4. So I take the sign of the 16, so that gives me negative 12x. Now I'm going to take care of the last part, 3 minus 16. Again, you have different signs, so we're going to subtract. 16 minus 3 is 13. Take the sign of the number that has the greater absolute value or the bigger number. So I take that minus sign or the negative sign, and that makes that minus 13. So my simplified form is negative 12x minus 13. All right, let's try this one. I'm going to write down the 3.5x. We're going to distribute that negative 2. So we're going to do negative 2 times 2.7. A positive times a negative is a negative, so that gives us negative 5.4x. I'm sorry, just 5.4. There's not an x. Now we're going to multiply that negative 2 times that 0.25. So 0.25 or 0.25, which is 2500ths, times 2 gives you 0.5x or 5/10x. A lot of you like to write 0.5, so I'll put it as 0.5. And I'll put the x with it. I'm going to regroup everything so that my like terms are together. So I've got 3.5x. Grouped together or put together with my 0.5x. I'm going to group my negative 5.4 or my minus 5.4. All by itself. There's nothing to go with it. So now I combine my like terms. So I've got 3.5x, and I'm going to work this over here. A lot of you don't think about lining up your decimals. Some of you are going to look at the 3.5 and the 0.5, and you're going to think it's 8.5. But remember, we have to line up our decimals with adding and subtracting. Both of these are positive, so they have the same sign. So same signs means we're going to add. So add them together. That gives us a 4.0. 4.0 is just the same as 4, so that gives us 4x. And I'm going to just drop down that 5.4 since there's nothing else to combine with it. It's just the constant. So my answer is 4x minus 5.4. All right. If you will redo these, please. Now, let's ignore this one. Let's not worry about that. But what I want you to do is to work these two out. So if you'll work this one, and if you'll work that one. So let's kind of reiterate. In lesson 7.1, you work with the distributive property. I can't even say it right. The distributive property, which will often be called expanding. So if you see something that says to expand the problem, you're just using the distributive property. 7.2, that was the factoring. 7.3, that was the adding algebraic expressions. This is what we did on Friday. We also talked about like terms, coefficients, and then today we talked about 7.4, which is subtracting algebraic expressions. We make this a little bit smaller so everything fits. So far, this is what we have covered in this unit. We still have one or two more things to talk about, and then we'll be able to have our test on it. And once you finish this, if you will work digits 7.4, please. And then I will give you a new list of IXL assignments.